Hello, everyone. My name is Yasha Mushfiqi, and I'm here to present the work titled NeuraSearch, Neuroscience and Information Retrieval. Information retrieval is a complex process. It starts by searchers realizing an information need. They then have to formulate that information into a query and submit it to an IR system. An IR system then matches the query to the documents and retrieves a set of relevant documents to that query and present it back to the user. The user then engages with those retrieved documents and satisfy their need. However, an information need can be ambiguous. And as a result of that, the formulated query would be just an approximation of the actual information need. And then, therefore, the retrieved results would be unsatisfactory. So then searchers have to engage further with the search process, trying to go through the retrieved results and find relevant documents, update their information need, and reformulate their query and submit it to the system again. This process continues until either the search is abandoned or the information need has been satisfied. To help searchers with their satisfaction of information need, IR systems have been trying to observe relevant documents and try to incorporate that into their retrieve system. One of the ways in which they've been doing this is by asking users to explicitly judge the relevant and non-relevant documents, known as explicit feedback. Although explicit feedback has been useful in improving the effectiveness of retrieved results, it's not reliable because it adds a cognitive burden to the user. So then IR systems have employed implicit feedback technique, where they try to infer the relevance of a document given the interaction of the user with the system. For example, they looked at mouse click or dwell time. Other researchers have looked into affective feedback or physiological feedback and tried to see if they are a source of information to understand whether a document is relevant or not. However, these feedbacks could not be directly included as a source of relevance of a document, and further investigation is required to understand that. Our position here is that by monitoring the brain activity, especially the regions that are activated during an IR process, we can reduce the gap between a formulated query and an actual information need. We can even eliminate this gap. The work that has been done in the past to understand the brain regions involved in a search process was called NeuraSearch, and it has drawn an increasing amount of interest recently in information retrieval and science community. This interest is aiming to understand the different IR components through neural mechanism. And they have studied a wide range of neuroimaging techniques. In this work, we will focus on two neuroimaging techniques known as fMRI and EEG, and I will present some of the works I've done in the past using these techniques. For knowing more about the current work in the NeuraSearch, I refer you to the paper. fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging, is a complex process that relates to blood flow, blood volume, and the ratio of oxygenated blood to deoxygenated blood. The signal that we're capturing by fMRI is called blood oxygenation level dependent, which is an approximation for neural activity. Also, there are some disadvantages associated with fMRI study. One is the design task limitations, because participants have to lie down and stay still within the MRI machine. As I said, the signals captured is just an proxy to the neural activity. That's another limitations, because these signals can be coupled with other physiological variables related to blood flow. But the advantage of fMRI is that it has a superior spatial resolution, and it can measure activity within the entire brain volume. That makes it very desirable for studies where try to localize the brain regions for a particular phenomena in the brain. We take advantage of this power of fMRI and try to see what are the regions involved when participants are deciding a document being relevant or non-relevant. Our hypothesis was that there are different regions involved when participants judging a document as relevant versus non-relevant. But the results we found was quite surprising. We identified 3 regions involved in the brain that activates both when participants are judging relevant documents versus non-relevant documents. And the only difference between these 3 regions were their activation level. We also looked at the phenomena of realizing an information need. And our hypothesis is that, are there any differences between when a participant realizes an information need and when they have no information need? What we identified was, again, 3 regions, which 2 of them are having statistically significantly more activation when participants having a memory retrieval. And there was 1 region that has a statistically significantly higher activation when participants experiencing a realization of information need. And that region is known as dorsal posterior cingulate. This region works as a hub in the brain that brings inward attention to outward attention. And that was a very interesting observation that we made. Of course, brain regions do not work in isolation, and they work as a network. So next step, we looked at the functional connectivity network between the brain regions involved in a realization and information need and memory retrieval. And what we have identified was 3 main components involved in a realization of information need. Component 1 relates to a successful memory retrieval. Component 2 relates to an information flow regulation. And component 3 refers to a high-level perception. The next technique that I would like to discuss is EEG. There are more than 86 billion neurons in the brain, which they communicate with each other. And that communication is through electrical pulses. The EEG tries to capture and record these electrical signals at a multiple location on the scalp. The disadvantages of having EEG recording is that it has a low spatial resolution, and signals can be easily contaminated by artifacts. However, there are advantages associated with EEG. One is that it's high temporal resolution, and second is that it's portable, and it has a scientifically well-established research. So, taking advantage of the power of EEG, we try to investigate when the relevant judgment is happening from the moment we show a stimuli to the user. Our hypothesis was that there would be a different time in the brain when somebody observes a relevant document or observes a non-relevant document. What we observed is that there are actually 2 main components from the moment that you show a stimuli to the user. For the first 300 milliseconds of showing an image, participants are just processing and decoding the image. And from the 300 millisecond to 800 millisecond, they are making a decision as to whether the document is relevant or not. We did a further study to understand what are the components involved in a graded relevance. And we looked at high relevance, low relevance, and non-relevance as our 3 levels. And what we observed is that there are significant differences in brain activity when judging information as having high relevance, low relevance, or no relevance. These differences were presented at all components of interest. And one interesting observation we did was that low relevance for having this sort of dual nature, where at 400 components, it's closely resembled the no relevance, and at 600 components, it closely resembled the high relevance component. With the encouraging results we obtained from these studies, the AI community now in much better position to understand the possibilities and limitations of NeuraSearch. But we're still barely scratching the surface, and there is so much more that can be done. From the realization of information till stopping a search process. That includes how searchers engage, comprehend, perceive, process, and judge information they encounter, and how this information ultimately contributes to the satisfaction of realize the information need. But this cannot be happening without a collaborative effort. Thank you very much.